This week on To the Contrary.
First, women to the rescue, the government's rescue. Then, the first woman to chair the Federal Reserve as a female role model. Behind the headlines, former Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison on pioneering women.
I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, are women the only adults in the U.S. Senate?
If President Obama and Congress want to avoid another government shutdown come December, they would do well to get more women in the room. Women senators were the driving force behind the compromise ending the government shutdown. Susan Collins of Maine, a moderate Republican, took the lead with a bipartisan proposal that became the centerpiece of the final legislation. Maryland Democrat Barbara Mikulski and two other Republican female senators, Lisa Murkowski and Kelly Ayotte, joined in the bipartisan effort. Nearly half who negotiated the bill's details were women, and it all reportedly began with a gathering of most of the 20 women senators at the offices of New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen.
So, Megan Byer, have women finally arrived in Congress? Do they have the power to get us through the next set of deadlines that come up in 60 days?
Absolutely, like the cavalry, they arrived, and I'm with Senator John McCain, who said, I wish we had 50 of them.
Look at Senator Collins. She's the epitome of power right now, and I think she's just one of the few women senators, I think, who has courage, conviction, and a conscience.
As the one bipartisan group that was able to forge a solution with credibility, I think the Women Caucus is shown to be the answer to sustaining democracy in this country.
I'm glad that the government is back up and running. I think it would be a mistake, though, to try to weigh who's a better leader, a woman or a man. I think both the genders have differences, but important characteristics that can be used for positive things.
But it was so amazing to me to watch this unfold, and the women really did devise the compromise. They pushed it through.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I think that's a strength.
And you would think men would be embarrassed to even let them come forward that way.
I think that's a strength that women tend towards. I think it's wrong to apply sort of gender stereotypes universally, but absolutely I think women are more relational. I think we're more collaborative in business, HR consultants.
Why? But wait a minute. Why is that? Is that because of testosterone?
I think it's an innate thing. I think it's a natural difference.
Go for the jugular?
But in this case, I differ from you. In this case, they actually showed that they made the difference, that men were fighting with each other. They were unable to come together, to come with a sensible compromise that people could take seriously. And we're the women who were meeting for a year or more from both parties that established an agenda every time they met to come together for common causes and purposes that were able to overcome the partisanship that the Congress is living right now.
And, you know, to your point about the qualities of leadership, there's a firm called Zanger-Folkman that has done a study of the 16 criteria for really fantastic leadership. And they looked at 350 leaders. This wasn't meant to be a gender study, but what they found was, amazingly, they did a very hard analysis of these 350 individuals, and the women trumped the men in 12 of the 16 criteria, and in some cases, those criteria were very much criteria that we would intuitively associate with men. Two of those were initiating a response to a situation, and another one was making sure you follow through to the end game and success. Women actually were better in those two criteria, and that's what we saw in Congress.
But why is it now, I don't mean to pin this on you guys, but you are Republicans. So explain to us, nonpartisan, okay, conservative.
Right, that's better.
But where did this all come from? I mean, everybody points to Ted Cruz and some of the House Republicans, the Tea Party, of course. But why were essentially 30 guys in the House able to hold the rest of Congress hostage? Was it because they were these right-wing political action funds were telling them, if you don't hold the line on this, toe the line, we are going to fund a more conservative candidate in your primary and you'll get knocked out of the House?
Look, there's some element of that, and I think you're right. I think there is some of we're worried about our reelection, but there is a fair amount. There is this segment in the House that really believes in this. They really saw this as their last stand, their last opportunity to do something to Obamacare, which they thought was very detrimental, and I think will be in many ways. We see that the society is not really ready for Obamacare in many ways. With its launch came missed deadlines and failures and glitches with the opening of the exchanges right in the middle of this shutdown. And I think what's happening here is that, you know, these are people who just really stood for what they believed in. And how it transpired is just a totally different picture.
So conservatives in the House were united in their opposition to Obamacare.
Right.
And January 1st is when many of the subsidies and tax credits and other mechanisms in the exchanges go live. So the urgency came from the implementation of Obamacare. I wish that Republicans had been paying bigger attention to Obamacare before such a late 11th hour. They should have been talking about it in 2012 because it should have been a bigger issue in the 2012 elections. But instead, we came to this last hour where, despite being united policy-wise, they were divided in their tactics.
So
But tell me about, and you're the Independent Women's Forum,
Right.
advised.
Well, we have the Independent Women's Voice, which is our 501c4 affiliate, and we were trying to come up with tactics and strategies to suggest to conservative members of Congress to pursue to undo Obamacare without pursuing necessarily a defunding strategy. We understand that there are good intentions behind that tactic, but it was not doable. And
but I mean, is that because, I got to ask you, is it because you're a conservative women's group that you were telling them to act like adults?
We're a sensible conservative group. I think it has less to do with gender.
But no, the other thing is the fact is the 2012 elections, Obamacare was on the table. And when President Obama got reelected overwhelmingly, there was a clear message that the majority of the country supported Obamacare.
That's false.
And that was the deficit. That was the deficit in which the Republicans have been working on. And the whole fantasy that we're saving the United States from this horrible
I think polling data
policy is not proving true. The polls do not show that. None of the polls show the same data. Certainly the polls related to the shutdown, people feel much strongly about the government functioning, that shutting down the government to save the world from Obamacare.
In September,
but to get back to the women having saved the day that we can all agree on, you know, this did not come in a vacuum. These women got together. I had lunch with Kirsten Gillibrand last week, and she said to me, if we only had 51 in the Senate. And I thought as a Democrat, she must have been talking about Democrats. She said, no, I mean 51 women. I was like, okay.
But so much of what Congress has done in the many, many years that I've watched it is, 11th hour governing. And that's what they were up against.
I think we should point out, too, that there were some men in Congress working towards a compromise as well. Ultimately, it came from the Senate and driven by some very important female members, but there were men like Senator Vitter and Representative DeSantis who were recommending, why don't we attach to a budget or a debt ceiling increase a requirement that members of Congress buy their health insurance in the exchange, just like the rest of Americans who have to buy their insurance in the exchange. I thought that was a very important issue. Our polling showed that 92% of Americans think it's unfair that Congress wants a special exemption. I mean, from a policy and an optics standpoint, if Congress passes a law that they want no part of personally, what does that say about Obamacare? I think it's pretty condemning.
And that also recognizes it's a law, not a bill, which
it is a law, absolutely.
All right, let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay or at To The Contrary. From women senators to the Yellen effect.
Janet Yellen will become the first woman to serve as Federal Reserve Chair after her presumed confirmation by the U.S. Senate, probably next month. For aspiring female economists, she could be an important role model. Men outnumber women 3-to-1 as economics majors across the country. It's not due to lack of ability or that men are better at math. According to Bloomberg News, women are more likely to become discouraged by bad grades in introductory courses. Men get bad grades too, but they press on. So the question is, will the so-called Yellen effect encourage young women to stay in the field? And could such a gifted female economist make them consider a career in one of the few fields where women are still hard to find?
So do you think once she's confirmed that young women interested in economics will stay the course instead of falling out as data show they do?
Well, I hope so. I mean, definitely having such an incredible record and who is so deserving of the job. I mean, this woman has been, working at this for so many years. It could be, hopefully will be a positive force. But there's so many other factors, the support system that the women need as they're going through a really difficult career. I mean, studying economics as someone that didn't do very well as I try to do it, it's really hard. Many of the jobs when they, go and apply, they're sometimes only female. So it's a lot of challenges that need to be overcome. But hopefully, I know women are capable. Now there's a role model, so hopefully we will see a difference.
Isn't it interesting about how, I find it fascinating that women, that students will take bad grades and say, okay, this is not for me, and drop out, whereas the men are like, who cares, and they plug on. And that's very similar, by the way. I did some reporting on the Chinese system of education. It's based very much on memorization, memorization, memorization. And it's supposed to teach you a life lesson that nobody gets it right at first. You're supposed to fail, and you're supposed to overcome adversity. Why don't we teach and that's how they teach them to go through life. Why don't we teach our young women that about economics?
And it's funny because that is the way a lot of European countries see America, that we're the land of redemption. That you have a resume of a senator and, his first company failed, or he lived out of a car. And, that's like our badge of glory, that he really failed and he really came back. And I hope that women will begin to buy into that resilience. I think one of the reasons that they don't is that in the case of Janet Yellen, for example, when you saw the social media respond when it was then Summers or Yellen, and you read all the comments, well, I think she sounds fine, but she doesn't have the virility that's required to do the job, and she doesn't have enough testosterone, and people might not accept her because she's not in their comfort zone. The great thing about social media is you hear what they're actually thinking. And, there are people who don't realize they're not supposed to be saying these things. And I think that seeing is believing. Once you start seeing women in these roles, then, you don't slide off that pole. You have adversity, yes, but someone has made it before, and you're going to try.
I remember as a child, Sally Ride being the first woman astronaut to really be well known, and an amazing woman, super incredibly smart. And that was important to me. I played a childhood game made by Mattel called We Girls Can Do Anything. And I've really grown up believing that. I think my generation of women doesn't take a victimhood mentality. We believe we're in control of our own destiny. But it does have something to do with confidence. As you mentioned, the bad grades. I saw another study where women and men were presented with a test. And the test giver said, you may have heard that women score more poorly on some mathematics tests. This test, that is not the case. With this test, that is not true. Was it a different test? No. They simply told the women ahead of time that women are scoring just as well as men on this test, and that apparently it gave the test takers some confidence.
Amazing, amazing.
Well, women have to help women, and I think that's got to be true of everything. There's so many STEM programs coming up across the nation. More women are encouraged to become programmers and coders, so why not become economists? Janet Yellen is going to be a great, I think, role model. I don't fully agree with her views of how to run that Fed, but I'll tell you, I think it's going to be a good thing. And Hillary Clinton, again, somebody who's not on my side of the aisle, but I can say fully, she's someone who was an inspiration. I think Janet will also be the same.
What about Christine Lagarde? I mean, she's been at the IMF now for a while.
Very lonely.
And she, unlike Yellen, she's a French fashionista, and she is just tough. Yellen seems like a really nice person. You might, I hate to say it, be able to push around a little bit, but Lagarde.
Well, actually, of Yellen, they say exactly the opposite. Yeah. That she looked really calm, and when the moment comes, she's the strongest person in the room and willing to say things nobody else is willing to say, and she has an impeccable record.
But I'm just saying about Lagarde, have young women been influenced by her? Because she has talked publicly about being a woman, and she said she had to grit her teeth sometimes and put up with mistreatment, but she didn't let it set her back.
But let me tell you, what's just as important as having the women see that women can do it is having the men see that women can do it. And there's no better woman in the world of finance than Christine Lagarde on that score. I have been to Davos the last 4 years, the World Economic Forum, and Christine Lagarde is fabulous. And they listen to everything she says. The room goes hushed when she starts to speak, and it's a sea of men at that World Economic Forum, and she has great respect, great credibility, and just this year, for the first time, she started talking about gender. and saying, you know, you all have got to start putting more women on your boards because you need a diversity of opinion. And studies like those at Credit Suisse, at Pepperdine, at Bain, you know, not feminist organizations, have, you know, told you objectively that if you have this diversity, your leadership will be more profitable.
All right, behind the headlines, and thank you for that, Megan. Pioneering Women of Texas. We interviewed former Republican Senator Kay Belly Hutchison about her new book, Unflinching Courage. But we also wanted to point out one major Texas newspaper this week bemoaned her absence from the Senate and her replacement, Republican Ted Cruz, who led the Tea Party-driven shutdown. Back to her book, which examines the lives of important women in Texas history. She says their spirits live on in Texas today.
These were 19th century Texas women who put their stamp on Texas because they were genteel Southern girls who had grown up in luxury. And they came to Texas with their husbands, generally to seek the land, the free land that was given to people who would be willing to settle it. That was what drew the early settlers. And they faced these harsh conditions for which they were not prepared, but they faced these conditions with unflinching courage.
Women such as Jane Long and Margaret Houston played a key, albeit underappreciated, role in shaping Texas. Before becoming a state, Texas was an independent nation.
Being a republic certainly has made Texas unique. We're the only state that came into the nation as a nation. Part of the pioneering spirit is independence, and I think that that is a strain that runs through Texas. I think you see it in a lot of the political figures that have come out of Texas. Barbara Jordan, Ann Richards, myself, but also the present two senators.
Her praise is nonpartisan. The two current senators Hutchison refers to are Republicans. Barbara Jordan, a pioneer in civil rights and a member of the House of Representatives, and Ann Richards, the second female governor of Texas, were both Democrats. Hutchison was acclaimed while in the Senate for her ability to work across party lines. As our conversation moved from her book on Texas history back to the present day, Hutchison bemoaned the current divisive climate in Washington.
It's very divided, and you don't see as much bipartisanship as when I first was in the Senate, that's for sure. But I do think that people are looking for more bipartisanship because that's how you get things done. You've got a Republican House, a Democratic Senate. You're not going to really make progress if you don't have some cooperation.
Former Maine Republican Senator Olympia Snowe recently told to the contrary she believes open primaries could be one cure for extreme partisanship. Hutchison supports the idea.
I think looking at our primary system would make a difference in the kind of candidates that would come forward. I won my first election in an open primary because it was a special election. A lot of the states have special elections that are more open like that. And I think it's worked fine. So I think looking at our election and electoral system certainly is one way that we could affect the kind of candidates that come forward that would have a significant impact on the partisanship.
One of the keys to fixing Washington, Hutchison says, is ensuring the continued inclusion of women. She cites Alexis de Tocqueville, a French political historian who visited the U.S. in the 18th century and wrote Democracy in America.
He wrote about the superiority of American women. He saw it back then that they were people that spoke their minds and the men listened to them. It was a respect that he thought was phenomenal. And he said it was the most important reason that he thought the success of democracy in America, even though women couldn't vote at the time, could be attributed because they were an equal part of society and they were making a mark. And I wanted that to be a part of our history.
So Hadley, are women left out of the history books, and what impact will her book have on, bringing credit to start the state?
I'm very excited about her book, and as she pointed out, de Tocqueville wrote about American women and democracy in America. Even before we could vote, we were very influential on the culture in the United States. We know that culture and politics are very tied. We know that policy is very tied to who we elect and how. But absolutely, I'm excited to see highlighting another great American woman in history, the mother of Thanksgiving, Sarah Josepha Hale, didn't even believe in giving women the right to vote, but she was influential nonetheless as sort of an early feminist.
Dolly Madison, don't forget the ladies, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have to say it's an interesting take on Texas history. It's more complex than that, but let's give credit to that particular community in that particular time. I think the bigger picture
Why?
here,
What's your take?
Well, because, there were Latinos, Mexicans,
Sure.
owned Texas before it was invaded, and
Right.
they didn't start Texas. They took over Texas, and, it's a complicated story, and there's a lot of Latinas that probably should be in that book that I'm sure are not. But that's okay. There's a piece of that story that she's telling, and she obviously is a woman that has dedicated her life to public service and made a very strong point, an important point about how there's a need to have more women in Congress, that they make a difference.
She dropped out. She didn't run again because she knew Ted Cruz was going to win the primary, and look what happened as a result. You could pin on him at least the Senate's role in letting
he was
the
a one-man
government
show.
shut down.
Okay, let's put it that way.
But would open primaries could she have won an open primary in Texas?
I believe Kay Bailey could have, and I think that's because she's a force. She's someone who's missed right now, as you noted. She's someone who was able to bring people together, and that is really what's lacking right now. And people are looking for that right now. They're desperately seeking for it. And I think she's someone who appealed to a lot of Texans. And of course, Republicans are of different stripes. You've got your Northeastern Republicans, and you got your Southern. But I think she was one that appealed to many different types.
If I could recommend another solution to this problem too, besides open primaries, it's an idea. Another idea is federalism. We see how Texas takes a lot of pride in their independence, and every state has a unique history, how it was made, and every state has a unique political flavor. And I think the solution there is to give states more control over how programs are executed. If Massachusetts wants Romneycare, let them have it. Texas clearly doesn't want Obamacare, or they wouldn't have sent Ted Cruz to Washington.
Sure. Well, and your thoughts about the open primaries?
Well, we have those in Virginia, and I think they're much better. I do. The thing I want to say about this...
But we also have divided government in Virginia in that, there's a conservative Senate. There was the guy running for governor right now from the Republican Party, Ken Cuccinelli, tried to shut down the Virginia government over defunding Planned Parenthood. So why are you saying
to be
they
perfectly
work
frank,
better?
I wouldn't take what's happening in Virginia right now necessarily as something that would endorse the idea of open primaries. But what I'm saying is, in a case like Kay Bailey Hutchinson, if you had an open primary, you could have people cross over, and I know many a Democrat who would have crossed over for her. In fact, she's a very good friend of Hillary Clinton's, and it is by virtue of their co-partnership with Vital Voices, which is this wonderful NGO that does many wonderful things around the world in development helping women. Every single year they come together and have an enduring friendship beyond their roles as senators. So I think that an open primary would have worked very well in Texas.
Well, from the strategist standpoint, I can tell you they're fun to game. But I think, again, you make a great point, is that we needed somebody like that. We need somebody who can cross party lines. And I'm just happy for Senator Collins. Again, I have to plug that. She's really great for coming across and being the person the Democrats approach first. We really need that right now.
And what about, will open primaries help diversity, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Although, I would say, the gerrymandering issue is very central to the issue of diversity, and is being discussed very much as to why the Tea Party have had so much control over the House of Representatives, because these members really come from districts that are so heavily Republican that they can say all these crazy things. They can follow strategies that are not supported by the majority of the country, and they still very strongly supported by their constituents in the district. So Open primaries, I would imagine it could be helpful, but more important, I think redistricting in a way that reflects the society at large and not the interests of the political parties, which would be even better.
All right, that's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay and at To the Contrary, and visit our website, pbs.org/tothecontrary, where the discussion continues. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, please join us next time.
What do you think the Republican Party is so big in Congress? Because in 2010, Democrats took a shellacking for Obamacare. I mean,
when Don was...
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the Cornell Douglas Foundation, committed to encouraging stewardship of the environment, land conservation, watershed protection, and eliminating harmful chemicals. Additional funding provided by the Colcom Foundation, the Wallace Genetic Foundation, the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, and by the Charles A. Fruoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at www.pbs.org/To the Contrary. Be more PBS.
Sam's Club Foundation is proud to support To the Contrary with Bonnie Urbay on 13 as part of its commitment to small business and the spirit of the entrepreneur.
On the next PBS NewsHour weekend, young entrepreneurs on the move.
The U.S. government is not issuing visas for them. Well, why don't you come to Chile? You are very welcome.
Silicon Valley on the next PBS NewsHour weekend.
Saturday and Sunday at 6 p.m. on 13.
I'm Neil Shapiro. As we celebrate our 50th year, we also celebrate our dedicated volunteers who give us their time and talent. Volunteers make vital contributions to so many other important institutions in our community. Here's a look.
Hi, I'm Neil Hetherington, CEO of Habitat for Humanity New York City. Habitat New York builds quality homes for hard-working families, revitalizes community centers, and unites all New Yorkers around the cause of affordable housing. Volunteers are the backbone of Habitat's work. Every year, thousands of dedicated volunteers donate their time to help us build, paint, landscape, and advocate. Thanks to these incredible volunteers, we have built hundreds of homes with low-income families throughout this great city. Habitat for Humanity New York City is proud to join 13 and give thanks to volunteers.
Join us for a delightful look back at seasons 1 and 2 and get a sneak peek at season 3 on Downton Abbey Revisited.
It means that deep down we're not on our side. Come war and peace, Downton still stands and the Crawleys are still in it.
Delight in the romance, intrigue, and drama.
There's never a dull moment in this house.
Both upstairs and down in Downton Abbey Revisited.
Join us Sunday night at 7:30 on 13. Watch previews of the highly anticipated 4th season of Masterpiece Classics Downton Abbey coming in January at 13.org/Downton Abbey.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next NewsHour, an update on where gay marriage stands in the states as New Jersey holds its first same-sex weddings. That's Monday on the PBS NewsHour.
On Masterpiece Classic.
It was an accident. You must not blame yourself, Papa.
You loving Murray looks like a curse on us.
Miss Audrey, are you unwell? You look afflicted.
Miss Audrey?
Denise will be in charge until further notice.
I will not let you undermine me.
I know I can make you happy. Trust that our feelings will grow. Everything I wished for then, I have it now.
Not everything you wished for.
The Paradise on Masterpiece Classic.
Join us Sunday night at 9 on 13. Catch up on episodes of Masterpiece Classics The Paradise online for a limited time at 13.org/masterpiece and on the 13 Explore iPad app.
What do I love about 13?
everything, and I love the fact that people have a voice.
Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, the Bluestein Family Foundation, the Joan Gans Cooney and Peter G. Peterson Fund, Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Malkin Fund, the May and Samuel Rudin Family Foundation, the Joanne and Kenneth Wellner Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan